So you guys probably know that I always say with these prototypes, I'm totally fine if they have chips or scratches or if they're not in perfect mint condition. It gives it more character, and honestly, if I see a prototype without a single scratch on it, I'm skeptical as if it's real or not. And I guess going by that metric, this prototype has a lot of character. It's probably one of the most beat up ones in my collection. The paint on this is just super strange. We'll get into it. It's not the typical finish of paint that you would see on a car or even prototypes. Like, it's super flaky, and I gotta be really careful with this one because it has flaked in my hand a little bit. But yeah, guys, welcome back to Prototype Prestige. This is episode 21, I believe. We got a couple more that I have pre-recorded after this, and then maybe I'll tack a few onto this season. Or, I don't know, maybe it'll just be next year in 2025. Who knows when this video will be released? I'm actually recording this on January 15th, so it probably won't come out for another few months, maybe even more. But yeah, we have Ed Truncan here, the Mood Springs Next Gen Racer. We'll get into why I concluded this likely is Ed Truncan. And I also have another prototype for Ed back here. You might already be able to spot a couple differences, but we'll get into that after the initial explanation here I want to give. So when determining a next gen in terms of like what prototype, what next gen character is this prototype, you got to look at, of course, the model. That's where you start. There's only 3, or I guess 4 next gen models. Cruise and Jackson Storm are obvious. And then you have the boxier model like this here. And then you have the slimmer model like Tim Treadless or Rich Mixon, right? So obviously this was the boxier model. Then you look at the expression. You look at the models right there, and the models here match. It's a pretty standard, just kind of grunting frown that almost all the next gens do have, except until you get to like maybe Danny Swervez has a little bit more of a unique expression because he's a little bit more prominent. And then the best tell is the wing, right? Surprisingly, and a lot of people, unless they're super hardcore fans of the Piston Cup racers and all the differences and whatnot, most people don't really get into the nitty gritty, into the weeds with the spoilers, but there are a lot of different spoilers that go on these next gens. And of course, I did find that these match. And there's only one other next gen to my knowledge that shares the same qualities here, and that is Eric Breaker. Now, it very well could be a prototype for Eric Breaker. In fact, who knows? It's probably a 50-50 shot. Maybe, we'll dive into it a little bit more and we'll try and analyze and give you guys a better answer. But the reason why I'm going with Ed Truncan is because it's super simple. But I already did a quote-unquote SynerG prototype. I did that John Halstead semi. And funny enough, that also could have been the bumper save next gen semi cab. So I guess, I just wanted things to look a little bit different. So I did Ed Truncan, but theoretically it could be Eric Breaker. But I will show you guys, just so you know I did my due diligence, some of the other next gen spoilers. Like here, while H.J. Hollis, same model, same mouth, you have, actually the mouth looks maybe a little bit different, but it's too minuscule to tell. You have a different wing here. It's a lot more triangular, whereas this one's a little bit more rectangular. Then you have this one on Will Rush, which is a little bit more elevated, kind of more of an oval shaped. Then you have the small spoiler, that's on Danny Swervez right there. And yeah, so that is what brought me to the conclusion here that either is Ed Truncan or Eric Breaker. And I also thought a good reason for it to be Ed Truncan, or a reason for me to put that in the thumbnail and kind of center the video around this, because I have this other prototype of Ed that I wanted to show you guys. But without any further ado on the explanation and all that, let's get into just, what the prototype looks like here and why it's one of my favorites in my collection. I absolutely love the color on it. It's this beautiful teal, kind of like on the Circus sedan that we reviewed in the last episode. It's a nice, very kind of light, faint, greenish, teal, turquoise, however you want to name it. But yeah, obviously missing all the decals. And on these Piston Cup racers, there are not many features. Like, there's not a whole lot you really need to do a prototype for after you get the first ones out of the way. Like back in 2017 when they did Danny Swervez and Tim Treadless. And, after so many attempts, like, it's going to be the same. And so I don't think we see too many, like, next-gen prototypes really leak out, like, as much as proportionate to the amount they release, right? I mean, they release absurd amounts of prototypes, or absurd amounts of next gens rather, and we only have a couple prototypes that we've seen of them. I do have a few others that I will show you here in a moment, so stick around for that. But yeah, the paint is super flaky, as you can see. Another weird thing about this prototype is that it has the same rims as Danny Swervez here. The black wheels with the orangish bronze trim. So initially I kind of thought, well, this is probably a Danny Swervez prototype, but then I came to find out that the spoiler was different, or the wing. Which brings me to my next point, is that at the end of the day, this could be a prototype for any next gen with this model, because they could easily flip or switch out the wing for the one that they ended up correctly doing. We know that they've messed up on the wings before. They've released Rich Mixon from Vietnam with the wrong wing, right? So who knows? This is a prototype, and as we talked about in this series, by definition, a prototype means they're testing, they're sampling, they're figuring stuff out. They could do whatever the hell they want with it. So the wing that they put on here is not necessarily indicative of what this was intended to be. But obviously, we're going to assume it was, but there is, of course, that chance that's not. And, a possible factor contributing to that is the fact that it has Danny Swervez's rims. But again, you could say the same thing about the rims, right? Hey, you could throw any tire on these cars. Like, we've seen Matchbox tires on cars prototypes, because it really doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, it's not like they match Ed Truncan's at all, which are blue, or Eric Breakers. Although I guess they're maybe a little closer to Eric Breakers, because Eric has the two-tone there, the green and the yellow. But it's the yellow and not the orangish gold. But yeah, another really cool thing about this prototype in particular is that it has a code 068, which is super rare for a straight up prototype to have a code like this. We've seen it many times before, but on all the prototypes we've done in this series for the most part, especially this season, none of them have had codes. The prototypes that have codes are engineering prototypes, the ones that are pretty much completely finished. They often get these codes here. Now this one, yep, is an engineering prototype, stamp 213 there. It also has a few other differences. The eyes are smaller, and we'll compare them in a second here. But my point is, it's rare for a prototype so raw like this, no decals, beat up to all get out, to have a code like that. It's rare you'll see something along those lines. So it makes this prototype super unique, because, I mean, there's only going to be one in the world that's stamped 068, right? So I love that. And I love the red wing that it has back here. Add some nice color to it. See what the base color is. Oh, it's just the gray. Sometimes these next-gen prototypes have funkily colored bases. But it's also interesting that there are no text, no writing on the base. Sometimes, I mean, prototypes often don't have all of the text, but they have some of it. So that's another kind of interesting thing with this prototype in particular. This wheel up here is also a little jacked up. It's like it got burned there on the side, or on the bottom rather. And here's the back. Again, no decals whatsoever, so not really much sense in comparing it to Ed, but we'll do it anyways. It's just kind of cool to see the base model that they use for these. The windows are also different. The interior piece is much more clear, much more transparent than what you end up getting on Ed. A very much so opaque plastic that you can't see through. There's no light kind of reflecting through it, but you can see through these windows a little bit more. And then here's another interesting thing. So Eric Breaker, his windows here have the bars going through it. Ed does not. Okay, so there's another kind of interesting difference between the two of them. Again, maybe suggesting this is indeed a Ed Truncan prototype after all. He also has this weird yellow streak on his side here, like a little paint streak. Kind of interesting, but I don't think it really means a whole lot. It's almost like a sliver from Danny Swervez's gold foil, but it's not quite that same color. All right, now I do want to show you guys a couple other prototype next gens in this model that I have. See, you guys can tell it's already flaking off its paint. There's a piece of it that just fell there. So I gotta be really careful when handling this because the paint, for whatever reason, is just coming apart at the seams. It's really unusual. But anyways, now speaking of like mint prototypes, somehow this one is literally in like perfect condition. This one could very well be a Danny Swervez prototype because of the fact that the models match and the wings match as well. So maybe this will be a future prototype Prestige episode. The wheels also match, and it has a code, which, like I said, is very rare. But it must have been something that a lot of these next-gen prototypes had. 119. And I also have this one in white here. That probably could very well be another Danny Swervez prototype with the mouth and the wing matching. This one is super damaged as well. Like the wheels are not even painted in any way, shape, or form. The axle is messed up, but it's got a cool green base and a lot of text on it. And the code there is DXV, yep, DXV42, and that matches the code on Danny Swervez. So this is almost certainly a Danny Swervez prototype. This one had, I guess this one has a different product code, FNV86. So maybe that's not Danny Swervez after all. I'll have to look who else has that mouth. But yes, all right. Getting back to Ed here, I do want to focus a little bit here on the engineering prototype that we talked about. So the eyes are a little bit smaller, but between the finalized version and the engineering prototype, you're not going to find that many differences unless you're lucky. Like there's a few out there that have some major differences. And I've kind of talked about some of those in my gig hauls before. Taco, for example, is one of those. Pat Traxton's quite a bit different. A lot of the Demolition Derby racers have glossy finishes, and then they end up having matte finishes on the finalized versions. But here, yeah, you don't really see too many differences. It's kind of an interesting spot where they put that code, though, the 213 up below the wing. Like you would think it would be maybe like right here, maybe in this area, maybe right there, but no, they kind of hit it. And it's not often that you would see the code in that area. I think my Ryan Inside Laney engineering prototype has it there, but a lot of them, yeah, have it in a much more obvious location. However, my Herb Kerbler, I'm just going to spoil it for you guys. My Herb Kerbler has it right here. So that's just bad luck. It's like, why even get that prototype? But I got it anyways. All right, guys, before my prototype loses any more paint, sheds any more hair, I guess we're going to end this episode of Prototype Prestige. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. I really do appreciate it. Let me know in the comment section below, do you believe this is indeed a prototype for Mr. Ed Truncan, or do you think I'm off my rocker and it should be Eric Breaker that I focus this video on? Let me know what you think. Thanks, as always, for your support. Bye now.